Brittanee Drexel was born in Rochester, New York on October the 7th, 1991, to parents John and Dawn. The pair were teens at the time and not married. The relationship ended shortly after Brittanee was born. Shortly after that, Dawn married Chad Drexel, who adopted the girl. Brittanee's childhood was not without problems. She was born with persistent hyperplastic primary vitreous in her right eye, which required several surgeries and rendered the eye blind. To cover the eye's tendency to wander, she wore contact lenses that gave her a distinctive appearance. During high school, Brittanee was a talented soccer player, and when she left school she wanted to be a maternity nurse. She also had dreams of finding Mr. Right and having children of her own. Unfortunately, these dreams would never come to fruition. In April of 2009, the now 17-year-old Drexel, like most girls her age, wanted to be out having fun with her friends, and when a group of her friends told her they were going to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for spring break, Brittanee wanted to go too. Drexel asked her mother if she could go, but her mother refused, since she did not know the other teenagers and there were no adults on the trip. She also had a premonition that something bad would happen. This led to arguments between the two for several days until April the 22nd, when Drexel asked if she could go to her friend's house for a day or two. Dawn agreed. Dawn knew her daughter was upset and figured she could spend a few days with her friend and things would cool down. Brittanee, however, would make a fateful decision that would change her life and the lives of those around her. Against her mother's wishes and without her mum knowing, Brittanee headed to Myrtle Beach with her friends anyway. Myrtle Beach was packed with revelers in April 2009. And the 17-year-old had been determined to join the fun. For the next few days, neither of Brittanee's parents, who had separated in 2008, had any idea she was in Myrtle Beach. She last talked to her mum on April the 25th. She said she was at the beach. However, Dawn thought nothing of this, thinking she was actually referring to a local beach. On the night of April the 25th, 2009, Brittanee decided to walk from the Bar Harbor Hotel, where she and her friends were staying, to meet a friend from her hometown and a few of his friends at the Blue Water Resort. Security cameras at the resort showed her arriving. Drexel was carrying a beige purse and wearing a black and white tank top, flip-flops and shorts. The cameras captured her leaving alone shortly afterwards at around 8:45 p.m. Shortly after leaving, Drexel began texting her boyfriend John, who had stayed in the Rochester area because of work commitments. She told him that she was walking back to where she and her pals were staying, the Bar Harbor Hotel, about 1.5 miles away. The pair were texting back and forth, but around 9:15 p.m, her texts suddenly stopped, and John began calling her friends in Myrtle Beach to see if they knew where she was or what had happened. John then called Drexel's mother Dawn, who had not known that her daughter was in Myrtle Beach until this point. Repeated calls and texts to Drexel's phone went unanswered, and the police were informed. The police began investigating almost immediately. They started the investigation with the last people she'd been seen with. 2 of the 5 guys Brittanee met at the Blue Water Resort that night told investigators she only stayed for about 10 minutes. Then left to return some clothing to another friend. Rousing suspicion at the time, the whole group checked out of their room sometime between 1 and 2 a.m. later that night. One of the friends that night, a 20-year-old nightclub promoter whom she had known from the Rochester area, immediately came under scrutiny. He and Dawn, Brittanee's mother, had several confrontations on the television show Dr. Phil. During this, he expressed frustration at the damage to his reputation. In the early days, many on social media firmly placed their suspicions on him or his friends. Investigators next checked Drexel's phone records. The phone network pings were tracked on a path leading 50 to 60 miles south of Myrtle Beach, in an area along US Route 17 near the Georgetown-Charleston county line. The pings had stopped abruptly early on the morning of April the 26th. Areas near there and around Myrtle Beach where a body might have been disposed of were then searched for 11 days. The timing of the pings clarified that her phone, at the very least, was travelling in a vehicle. Dawn Drexel did not think her daughter would just take off without saying anything, especially leaving all her luggage behind. And in the days immediately following the teen's disappearance, Dawn and Chad Drexel went down to Myrtle Beach to pass out missing persons flyers and look for her themselves. John also went to Myrtle Beach during that first week, taking a break from work and school to focus on the search for his girlfriend. The couple had been dating off and on for 2.5 years. He described her as a really strong-headed person, and he didn't think she would run away or harm herself. Despite numerous search efforts and the high level of publicity the case was attracting, nothing would be found that would lead investigators to getting any closer to finding out what happened to Brittanee Drexel that night. In fact, it would be another 7 years until the case would be suddenly thrust back into the spotlight. In June 2016, the FBI held a news conference, during which they stated that they believed that Drexel had been murdered shortly after her disappearance. She had been abducted from Myrtle Beach and taken somewhere in the vicinity of Georgetown, near where the cell phone pings had ended, before being killed there. The Bureau put up a $25,000 reward for information, leading to the resolution of the case. Not long after that, the police would get a big break, which appeared could bring the case to a close. In 2016, authorities announced that an inmate had come forward and said Brittanee was kidnapped and murdered and disposed of in the swamps near Georgetown. Taquan Brown, a South Carolina inmate who had begun serving a 25-year sentence for manslaughter, told them that in 2009, shortly after Drexel disappeared, he had gone to visit a McLennanville stash house to give money to the father of one of his associates, Timothy Deshawn Taylor. As he walked through the house, he saw Taylor sexually assaulting Drexel with others present. He continued to the backyard, where he found Taylor's father and made his payment. As they talked, Drexel ran from the house, but was soon recaptured. Brown said he saw Taylor pistol whip Drexel, then take her back inside. He then heard 2 gunshots, which he assumed were the sounds of the young woman being killed. Brown claims to have seen a wrapped body being removed from the house, then dumped in one of the many alligator ponds in the area. Brown's statement to investigators was partially corroborated by information received from another informant who was not identified but was described as having been incarcerated at the Georgetown County Jail at the time. According to the second inmate, Taylor had picked up Drexel in Myrtle Beach and taken her to McLennanville, where he showed her off to his friends and tried to sell her to them for trafficking purposes. Brown said that when the case drew heavy media attention, Taylor decided to kill Drexel to avoid arrest. Despite the accusations, Timothy Deshawn Taylor and his family never wavered. From the very beginning, they said accusations of their involvement in Brittanee Drexel's death was totally false, but those accusations had a chilling effect on the Taylor family. Their lives were threatened and their livelihoods lost. For Timothy Deshawn Taylor, his name was publicly dragged through the mud for years, and he was prosecuted twice for a crime which he'd already been punished for, and ultimately detectives would learn the whole story was fabricated. After years of media scrutiny, Deshawn Taylor would be cleared. After a 13-year investigation, authorities announced on May 16, 2022 that they had recovered Brittanee Drexel's remains. 62-year-old Raymond Douglas Moody of Georgetown, South Carolina, had been charged with murder and kidnapping in her death. Raymond Moody, a registered sex offender, turned himself in to the Georgetown County Sheriff's Office. Police had first considered Moody a person of interest in Drexel's disappearance as early as 2012. Moody confessed to the crime and provided the location of her remains. The FBI searched the site over the next 3 days. By May the 11th, human remains were located, buried in the woods off a gated private drive outside Georgetown. They were identified as Drexel's through DNA and dental records on May the 15th. The arrest warrant alleged that Drexel had been strangled and then buried by the morning of April the 26th, the same day she disappeared. Moody pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to life in prison.